So you can see last year's work. I did choose here. So I'm just going to start with the slide for group 1. Please, I'm going to show you the examples, and I'm going, as I scroll through this, I'm maybe mentioning what is good and what is may not be that good, but I'm not going to explain how much marks or how many marks they achieve. Can the person with the microphone can switch them off, please? Hello, thank you. So this is group 1 last year. So it is good to introduce the project with project deliverables and any assumptions that you made. For example, we're going to assume that this is going to be built in 2 phases or 3 phases. We're going to assume that the client is going to require full 100% sustainability on this. Any assumptions that you made, you need to explain that early on. Can I ask everybody to switch off the microphone, please? Because looping back on the recording. Thank you. Moving client requirements. So well explained at the beginning. This is, as I said at the beginning.
Trina, we can't see your screen, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I haven't shared
hold
it.
on.
Okay.
I'll go back to the chat. Sorry. I forgot to press that. I have to share the screen. And I can see that you can see it. So I'm going to start again. And this is group 1 last year. So I said at the beginning, make sure that you clarify any assumptions that you made. And this one, they have made client assumptions, and they quite well explain at the beginning of the presentation. So anything that you think that you are making assumptions other than what the brief was asking, you need to explain this early on. We move, and there is a explanation how the group work, what are the roles, and so on, and how do they work together, especially giving us ideas about communication, collaboration, and so on. We're moving on to the project managers section, and then explaining project managers' outputs, standards that they use, and remember that it's the BIM process includes process, technology, and behavior, so social BIM, and it's about how you're going to manage that from the position of the project managers. Yeah, there's a brief team 1, so they did rewrite the brief, and this is something that you could do or not, but it's up to you how you're going to do that on your group. There's a RACI matrix and the milestone chart, including the program that is explained here. Some of the elements of the brief as well highlighted here to explain how it works. I think there's somebody knocking on the door. Can Shadan on?
Yeah, I'm admitting them. Don't worry.
Thank you. Project managers collaboration. So at the end of each, in this particular one, some groups decide to do collaboration at the end of all the presentations, but in other groups, they decide to do collaboration. Who's that? I don't know, but I carry on. So they are explaining collaboration at the end of each team or sub-team or role presentation. This is talking about the CDE, so the use of CDE and the different alternatives or tools that you use for communication, explaining how they work for reviews, working for transmittals, and also for managing requests for information or RFIs. As well, some examples of evidence that we want to see in the presentation is the evidence how you actually determine what are the actions to be taken, how do you record the minutes, or how do you record that who is doing what. And it's giving that evidence at the end, so you can demonstrate how you work and negotiate with other teams to be able to work together. 3Ds, obviously, we want to see those 3Ds coming from the model. So you can see that they're using these to illustrate the presentation throughout. And that has actually enabled people to maybe access the information together. You can see in this case that we're in that situation, Adolfo and Ganiyu were working on this model from 360. The risk register, that's something to do with health and safety. I think that I've seen communications on the module about what is the the person in health and safety doing. This is one example. So you can see, for example, what are the limited responsibilities or client representatives' responsibilities about health and safety management on this project. We move on to the BIM managers. So it's more seen from the position or perspective from the BIM managers, and it's about how they did coordinate and manage the information put in 360, but also outside 360. The clash detection, we talked about this last week, and you were meant to be doing a clash detection simulation in your project so you can demonstrate and actually talk about this on your presentation. So the idea of moving to a site with 0 errors, 0 clashes, and reduced number of RFIs and changes will be an ideal situation to be in, and saying in your presentation how would you manage that will be useful. Clash detection resolution, another test. So they did test base, so a test base one, and then they do another one, and they explain what the difference between the two methods. I think that was very good, particularly in this presentation. They seen the same problem, looking from 2 different ways of solving it. The BIM managers, and then working about how do they manage the information on the schedules, work breakdown structure, and then using data inputs and outputs from the model. So I think that will be very good and help you to understand how you can structure that information together for your presentation. Then the sequence workflow, so data, the format CDE, and then the coordination file, all the way to that coordination happening all the way to the end. The 4D sequencing, that's something that you're doing next week. So establishing and explaining what's the process that you went through. And if you, I think I can play this and you're going to be able to listen to, that is the simulation sequence that they created. I'm not going to play it all because I think we go very short time, but you can see that this is a way to do it. A little bit of a shame that the trees were on the line side and we couldn't see that much. So please make sure that the actually video is useful. You can see more actually on the images in the middle rather than on the sequencing video. Architects or design team. So it's about talking about locations and the whole conceptual plan and how you came up with a final design with some of the key elements that you needed to discuss with other teams. Conceptual, so it's a little bit of moving that conceptual drafting through a proposal that works and come up with a final decision to think about how that kind of maximizing, for example, natural light, reducing the use of energy consumption, and so on. Structural engineers, you can see, for example, was the planning, net of code and field, fabrication system, and the collaboration aspects of this work. And you can see how they came up with a final solution. Material consideration for the choice of material, explaining what were the justifications for that, and the design standards applied to that specific structure, including case studies as seen as good and positive. A shame there's no references on the slides, so we cannot see back or follow up what that case study was. So I think I will encourage students at master level to use in-text reference to explain where the case studies are being sourced from. A little bit more information about that. It's probably explaining what happened in the case study. And then we move into MEP. And you can notice on the top that they use different tools to measure, for example, the level of detail of the services that they're designing. Electrical plan, this is for the infrastructure for the whole site, but you can see as well a little bit more as we move on with probably, so we're looking at electrical and drainage plan, but then we're also looking at lighting, car chargers. This is mainly infrastructure, rainwater harvesting, and then they look inside the buildings and start to use and test different software to test the levels of artificial lighting in the buildings. And then collaboration, submitting designs for approval by other teams, workflow with BIM managers. I think, Shadan, you're dealing with the knocks on the door. Moving to the design modified accordingly and so on. So all the way to explaining that process of how you work with other teams, site managers. So important documents or standards, challenges, and how they process throughout the whole construction. And they use this 3D model as the images that they want to explain how they work will, how the construction will work. Safety engineers explaining what they're doing about this and some of the data they research, but also what are the policies or regulations that they stick into. Yes, 10-point plan. And then moving into the benefits and so on. And they did another image here using Enscape, because I can see the Enscape and Navis work. Some of the highlighting risks have been done through the 3D model and the finished site. Case study as well on health and safety, and then finishing with the quantity surveyors and explaining collaboration first, but then moving on to communications and exchange of information throughout, including how they exported schedules from the model, directly from the model, and reports, and then use those for the costing of the project. It's quite kind of high level costing, is not too detailed, but I think this is sufficient. Yeah, assumptions consider, and then come up with a final cost, key requirements for cost planning, so explaining the process a little bit more, and then collaborations and case studies to explain how they manage collaboration across different teams. And they have a final video at the end. I'm not going to play this too long because I want to show you another example. So you can see a shame that the trees were on the way. So please make sure that your video is a little bit more suitable. You can see the sequencing better here. However, the view with the trees is maybe not the best one that they could use. So I'm going to shut this down and share another one. This one they have two, so I'm just going to show the latest. So in this one, it's going to be a similar. In this one, they have used the 3D model, but they also use photorealistic renders from the 3D views from the model. So you can see that I probably use Enscape to do this, but also they gave their own company a name. I think that's something that could make you bond if you're working well. And then moving into the introduction, a little bit of the project brief, and then some of the organization hierarchy on the team and who's doing what. That is super useful for us when we're marking. Please don't miss that one. Collaboration. So speaking how they manage collaboration, you can see that students were on campus at that point. So that's probably pre-March. And then how they use different tools to manage communication and collaboration in the team. BIM definitions, so explaining a little bit of the targets and what they're sticking to. And then moving on to what are the different activities that they're doing, and mentioning maybe different software they have used throughout. Yes, as we move on, different tools that can help, for example, laser scanning, augmented reality, and so on, and coming with client objectives. What is the client asking for? I actually do like that actually having these renders with twin brothers sitting into different desks, but it's absolutely fine. We don't mark you down for that. BIM documentation and deliverables. This is a BIM presentation. Please avoid falling into the traps of doing traditional construction because it's a BIM-enabled construction project. This is something I like to reinforce and emphasize because this is a BIM construction module. It should be focusing on BIM for construction operations. We move on, and with they talking about digital plan of work. So MBS toolkit, very good references being used. We can see some of the references having used an in-text reference. I think is a very good practice. Please do that. Yeah, you can see as well some of them being used throughout and explaining how they manage the implementation of BREEAM in this project, information management and the CDE, and how they manage all that information. And then the program and sequence of work. As you see that each group will have a different way of approaching and presenting the work. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other. Obviously, there was one better than the other, and you can actually starting to make judgments based on this. But as we move on, there's a little bit more, this in particular is a little bit more being focused than the previous one. Case study for Costex, they tried Costex. It didn't quite actually work perfectly, but I think that those attempts at working in different tools will be very good research to bring into your presentation. Site management and logistics, you can see a site visit. I'm not encouraging people to go and visit the site, but if you're around, you can go and take pictures. For example, it's quite public. All that is a green space in Lockleys or Muller Road. Then pros and cons of that site and so on, all the way to move onto the site management and logistics. And you can see the phases of constructions at the bottom, and you can see how the progression of that BIM model is going on throughout on the top images. Little bit explaining how groundworks and structure, movement and traffic management plan, the crane and so on, that could be good to explain at this point. And a little bit of a site management plan with hoarding, gates, access, egress, vehicular transit, how you're managing all this. The future of 3D site management plan, I think this was a good addition. And it's explaining what is a kind of a BIM-based automated site layout planning framework. So I think that was good. Planning phase and construction phase for health and safety. And I think it's good that they're breaking this into the planning phase and construction phase. It will be good to see a post-handover phase too. Scope of work on health and safety. And it's about what are the different steps of or aspects that they included on this presentation. And then move and the risk assessment and identify, evaluate, record, and update. Use of process to actually build that risk assessment plan. 3D health and safety plan, so it's looking more in detail and managing and actually highlighting risks on the 3D model. Design team, so explaining a little bit of the design, how do they approach this, what were the concepts, how did they come up with a final decision. They use, in this case, they use some nearby buildings to explain maybe a little bit more contextual, and then using different approaches to the design and explaining how the design works, including issues like summer, winter, solar analysis, and any other aspects that you want to include. For example, if you're using any sustainable systems that you're including, or maybe an alternative way of laying out your buildings, you can explain that at this point. BREEAM is something important to the design team, and as a contractor, you'll be as well interested in making more sustainable. And it's one particular aspect or constraint of this site is about drainage. So you're gonna get all this water running downhill, coming all the way to the site. How are you going to manage that? As more importantly, how are you going to manage the drainage of the building site so it doesn't end up on the road? And it's a way that they explain this, so the use of rain grid and gabion walls to manage that, and they broke the site into zones and actually managing this and link to the road water system or drainage system. As well, explaining those kind of more sustainable elements like the photovoltaics and how they came up with a selection and positioning and proposal. Little bit on lighting and power inside the building. Although we're not expecting to see every building to this level, it would be a good idea that you explain how you're working that out. Yeah, and the MEP site arrangement. So this is more about aspects of the construction during the construction process, but then how you're going to end up having the final solution after the construction is finished. Moving into structure, so the choice, justifying the choice and explaining how you negotiated this with other teams, for example, in terms of costing, sustainability, buildability, and so on, and what were those decision-making process that you came up with that final choice of steel structure in this case. And then a case study to illustrate or to support the decision, BIM manager, information management, a little bit of checking your spelling, guys, because my eyes go immediately to those issues. So please make sure that you do leave enough time to check your work. You can see on the right-hand side additional supporting evidence coming from the model. And we expect that to see and use that to illustrate your work. Here is more BIM strategy and implementation and talking about the BIM documentation that we talked last week, but I'm sure that Shadan and Karine have been making reference to throughout the semester. BIM 360 or the CDE, explaining how it works. And then moving to clash detection, 4D simulation and 5D costing, live costing, and explaining how they work, and come up with a final video if you have done so. BIM construction, innovation, and the future of construction. So looking at what are the opportunities, thinking lean, and thinking about how can technology and BIM can enable a more sophisticated, more efficient building or construction site. Critical analysis, a little bit demonstrated in one slide here, but I think it needs to be demonstrated throughout the presentation, not just one slide. And they have some videos. I'm not going to play these videos here, but I'm going to leave that in the recording if you want to go and see them. They're all in YouTube. So I would invite you to do that. I'm just going to go and open the last one that I'm going to show you today. And then I will break for questions before I have to go and meet my boss. This is a handout. These are the slides. So I think let me just try to make it one slide size. Is that a question on the chat or somebody knocking on the door?
Someone knocking.
That's fine. Thank you, Karine.
No questions, Gina. Okay,
that's fine. So I'm going to carry on. And this is a group 3. Sorry, my screen's got a lot of fluff, so I cannot see with the sun. So BIM construction operations, as I mentioned, some of the groups like putting names on their own companies. I think that's up to you, but I think that will give us a little bit more like a professional looking report or presentation at the end. And having an agenda or contents page is a good place to start. I would like to see assumptions made as well at the beginning. So give us those assumptions that you made at the beginning of the project. So they're starting to break these. If you see, they organize it slightly different. However, I can see the contents page, but then I see a BPEIR communication, but it's not on the contents page. So you need to think about why put a contents page, but the first element on the contents is not on the contents page. I'm just mentioning this as I move on. Project brief. Somebody knocking, beeping outside the door. So I'm just gonna carry on. So project brief, a little bit of explanation about what the project's about and deliverables, the organization. I said this is quite good at the beginning. It actually helps us understand who's doing what. So organizational structure, yes, we need that. BIM execution plan. So as far as they coming straight here to talk about BIM and how the BIM execution plan is important, but also about the BIM execution plan in terms of naming convention, sharing that information, and communicating regular team meetings. Obviously, you're not on campus and you're not going to be able to have face-to-face, but how you have used different technologies to enable you having that virtual communication or working online. Project manager, assigning roles, construction schedule, racing matrix, collaboration, and then the program. Racing matrix, a little bit, I think on this term, a little bit short, but I think it's up to you how much you want to develop. You saw the other example that had a little bit more developed project manager. The architect explaining a little bit of the site approach and the decisions made on design. And then moving on to that, we can start seeing that BIM model and illustrating those design options. So they're looking at exploring that this initial design 2. So you can see that the slightly different one facing the kind of top corner of the site, whether the other one is looking the other way around. And then they will come with a final design choice that obviously is different to the other two. So I'm thinking, is the design option and design option 2, are they valuable to explain the process that you went through? Or is it only valuable to demonstrate the design? And I think here, the most important thing is demonstrating how you use BIM and the different technologies that you're using to exchange information and come up with a final decision making on the final design. From view, so a lot of views, that's something quite easy to get out of the model once it's built. So I want you to demonstrate the BIM process, not necessarily that you can actually export and 3D render from the BIM model. I know how easy it is to get that. So I'm hoping that you're going to illustrate your work with those and not necessarily lose the focus on the BIM process by creating a lot of renders that are not telling us what is the BIM process that you went through. Structural, the same thing. So a little bit of exploring choices. What is the design process? How did you use the BIM model? How you came up with the final decision, communicating with different teams, and then come up with your process, explaining how did you do that. Little bit of the 3D as well, explaining the cost and feel exercise, and a little bit of risk register. And this one, I'm not sure what it fell on the structural design, but probably we'll find out later when we hit the health and safety team. And case studies as well. Civil engineer, I don't know why civil engineer is separated from the other one, but I guess they've done a little bit of infrastructure on the site, and I think that is okay. MEP, design, internally, and then infrastructure, I hope. Plumbing. Not sure why this is important, but they actually felt that it was important to include. And then we can see the infrastructure decisions at the end of that session. And then the quantity surveying with cost text, little bit of the information they used to put together the costing plan, and then explaining the kind of decisions that they made and how they come up with the final cost. They attempted the use of Revit and cost text, and not sure if it was successful, I don't remember, but I think Even if it's not successful, I think it'd be good to add as part of your research. And then maybe explaining what were the things that didn't work or the challenges that you think you're going to encounter if you try to do this. Little bit of personal considerations. I think that is good, but I think rather than individual consideration should be a group consideration. This is a group presentation. Project whole life cost, so thinking in long-term post-handover, how far away can we reduce the cost of operations and maintenance? That is quite an amazing feat, but I think if you can reference where did you source that, it will be even better. So adding in-text reference to where did you find information would be good. I think because of this, I am assuming that is BCIS, but you need to put an in-text reference somewhere so we know that. And then the HVAC whole life cost, they decided to go for a whole life cost in one particular aspect of the buildings, and that is fine as well. Site manager, principal contractor, site key moves or process, and then principal contractor and health and safety. So working together, remember about shared distribution of risk. And what does that mean? Can we enable a better risk management by sharing risk? Rules and regulations that you need to observe and guidelines, and then come with your own forms and regulations that you need to observe. And moving into that side, 3D modeling, highlighting risk, hoarding, access, crane, equipment, material store, and all that, washing facilities and all that. The schedule of works, so you can see the site manager working a schedule of work, and also explaining the site logistics plan and what was the idea, and explaining absolutely every decision they made with the 3D to illustrate that. Construction stages, so explaining how will that work in time, including the project manager full program risk register at the end of this. There's a little bit of explanation of clash detection, and then how did they manage that process throughout, and then explaining demonstrating how they managed to resolve those clash detections conducted at different stages in the process. Clash detected, some examples and how they came up. I would like to see on this stage that you're actually explaining how you manage a clash that needed to be resolved from different teams. So for example, the MEP, the architects, and the costing team, and then how you resolve that if there were different teams working together. For this simulation, there is a little bit of animation here. You can very welcome to go and follow this to see them. And remember that we're not giving you an idea of how well they did. Not everything that you're gonna see is gonna be working. What can you learn from that? What can you do that can inspire you to do better? Or what can you do or avoid things that they done that didn't work that well? Conclusions, conflicts, and I love actually that they end up with lessons learned, what worked and what didn't work, and how would you do it if you have to do it again. Collaborations is one aspect that will bring a lot of conflicts. How would you actually manage that better in a next project? And a list of reference. Remember, these are master levels. We want to see those reference. I'll go back to the chat because I think there were some questions. Oh, plenty of people here. So I'm open for questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I will upload the session, the video, when I finish on Blackboard. Questions, please. Do we have a chat? No questions so far? Ahmed, would you like to add anything to what I said? Any advice or tips for the students? You're mute. You're mute.
Sorry. I prepared something for what shall you do, what shall you don't do.
Okay, would you like to share that? But
Yeah.
let's wait just a second, because if there are no questions and I have a meeting with my boss,
Okay.
I will leave you. And if you can just click on stop the recording so I can get the video.
Okay.
I think automatically if you all leave the session, that will
Yeah,
stop.
it will stop automatically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I can access that from the app. So I don't want you to worry about downloading the video. I can do that another time. So let's see if there are any questions. If not, I'm going to give the choice. Anyone with questions? I think everybody's really quiet. Don't be shy, guys. It's okay to ask questions. It's the right place, right people that are here, and you can ask any questions about your work. Everybody's got the same questions as you. Don't worry, even though everybody's quiet, everybody's thinking the same thing.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, because you showed us a lot of working from people, and there is a lot of levels. What do you think about which level we can go to, or to reach? Which level we can reach? Because a lot of people done a lot of great things.
Yes.
And now it's a limited time. So what do you think about it? Yeah.
Well, I think the first thing that needs to happen is satisfying the brief. So look at the brief that you were asked to and think about, I am actually meeting or satisfying these requirements, because some people when they get busier and they get playing with a model and getting exporting images, they forget about the brief. So thinking about submitting the evidence that you've been asked to submit on the brief, looking at the marking grid, because that's the goalpost. That is where you have to score the goal. So are we doing, for example, innovation? Are we doing a BIM process? Are we doing enough research? Are we doing critical analysis? So it's trying to kind of think about what is the quality of the work that you're producing and the evidence that you're demonstrating there. Okay. Thank you, Karina. I will. I'm not sure if Shadan thinks that I am right, that Ahmed is right, or Karina is right.
we all right.
Yes, thank you, Karina. Karina, if you don't mind, if you could stop the recording, do you know how to do that?
I am not sure. Let me see if I can stop it, because since you are the one moderating.
Don't stop it. Let's do something. What I'll do is leave the session open in the background. So I'll mute myself and I will connect to the other meeting, but I leave this one open so I can come back at the end of my other meeting here and I can stop the recording.
Yeah, I just saw that I don't have the option of stopping.
That's fine.
I guess Trina, because you're the one that started the recording, you have to finish it.
Stop it myself. Thank you. You see how often I do recordings. Anyway, so there's two things. Looking at the brief, am I satisfying the brief? The second one, looking at the marking grid. I am ticking the boxes here. For example, collaboration is something that you need to evidence throughout, and some people forget about this. They just mentioned there was something in collaboration, but there's no evidence about how you, for example, work with other people. How did you communicate it with other people? How you came up with and make a final decision. The fourth element is about the content, deciding what is the content that is coming to the presentation. You're going to produce a lot of work, but it's about curating and selecting the evidence that you need to have there to illustrate what you're saying. Too much information, too much visual information can get your market or your public lost, because I don't know where to look and it's going too fast. So it's thinking about the right amount of information and the right information to illustrate what you're trying to explain. So for example, if you're explaining a process of decision making, maybe not include absolutely everything, but just what is particular to that. If you're talking about case study, it's explaining the case study, putting the right titles, putting a reference and explaining what is about the case study. Case studies are not just okay to mention. You need to explain why they're there. Why do you want making this analysis? Why do you think it's worth learning from this case analysis? Maybe it's a case that you chose for an innovation, something amazing that is happening.
It's not relevant.
Yes, but you need to explain what is that here. It needs to be justifiable, the inclusion of a case study, for example. So, and then as well, we understand that sometimes simulations don't work the way we want. So, for example, in the case that I showed you, that 4D simulation and the trees were in the middle, you will run out of time, and we understand that. We're not expecting you to do a Hollywood production, and we understand it's the first time, so we want to see that you tried. Even if it's not 100% successful, we want to see that evidence. I don't know if you want to add anything, Shadan.
No, I really agree with you about, like, first make sure that you tick all the boxes, and if you want to add any more information, make sure it's relevant to what we are asking of you.
Yeah.
Make sure it's relevant to the construction operation side of things, and not, like, for instance, the design kind of things.
Yes.
Don't go much into that. Just make sure that it's relevant to the module.
Yes, and I will reinforce that point. Some people get lost track thinking this is a design process. This is actually a construction process. We will improve the design because that will be part of the responsibilities of the contractor. And maybe we're thinking in the longer term in post handover, but it's because we are thinking from the contractor's perspective. So don't lose track that this is not design, this is not an operations and maintenance, this is a contractor's perspective on this. So I'm hoping with that, if there are no more questions from the students, I saw a student just showing up in the camera. It was good to see your face. I love seeing the student's face, so it was good to have that. Any other questions from the students before I go? I will leave this. Yes, PV. I don't know who PV is.
Oh, hi, Trina. It's Peter Bird here. Hi.
Peter, how you doing?
Very well, thank you. Very good. In our group, we have sort of varying sort of capabilities in terms of there's no real structural input and no real MEP input, so other people with other experience are taking over those roles. So the information they produce may not necessarily be an accurate. I mean, some of those examples there had sort of lighting layouts, and you sort of mentioned that should justify that lighting layout and why it is. We may not have the capacity to do that. Is it acceptable?
Don't worry. It is acceptable. I think as long as you can understand that you can demonstrate the process, and it's about the BIM process and how would you coordinate this with other people. We don't need to see actually dots. We're not expecting to see the dot design or sizes of sockets or loading capacities for electrical circuits. We're not expecting that level of information. We're expecting that you actually tell us how would you manage and how would you collaborate if you were the MEP and working towards this project. So we're not expecting to see sophistication in the design. We expect to see BIM process, collaboration, and technical, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Thank you very much.
So if you notice in the 3 presentations I've given you, some of them will be better in MEP because probably was an MEP engineer in that team. But we're not expecting that level of sophistication in the design.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
That's great. Thank you very much.
That's okay. Anyone else?
There is another question.
Yes.
From Emmanuel.
Yes, Emmanuel. Where are you?
No, it's not. Okay.
No. Okay. Yeah. Well, I think let me see the time and the calendar. Where is the meeting? Sorry, I don't see the meeting in my calendar, so I'm panicking. So I'm just gonna leave you then. I will leave the meeting in the background open, but I'm not gonna be able to listen anymore. If there are any other questions, Shadan, can you answer them? And if there's something that requires me to get involved, just let me know.
Yes.
And I will come back for the recording. Thank you everyone for joining me today. I know many of you. I'd love to meet some other ones. Yes, I will download the I will download the recording and post it on Blackboard as soon as I have a time. I am super busy today, so it's more likely that I'll do that tomorrow. That's okay. Good to see you guys. I will see you soon. Thank you, Ahmed, for preparing that little short session.
Thank you, Trina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye.
Bye, Trina.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you from Emmanuel.
Oh, thank you, Emmanuel. I'll see you soon. Adios.
Okay, that was a very, very, very interesting and informative session. I'm sure you all really got a lot of it, a lot of things from it. So, are there any questions before we move on? Because because my computer crashed earlier. Ahmed, you said you wanted to share something. Did you share it?
Yeah, no, I didn't yet. Maybe I will share it now. Okay.
Yes, because I don't, because my computer just crashed suddenly. So yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this is just what you should do and what you shouldn't to do. Just stick with the presentation brief and make sure that you include all the item. Just check the box, tick the box of the presentation brief. Read the marking grid for the presentation because you will know what you can concentrate of your selling points. You can do a lot of things in something, you will not get a lot of marks of it. The presentation slides shall be coherent and relevant to the objective. Don't put anything in the presentation. You will not use it. You will not be relevant to the presentation brief. Try to have written script, and this is an advice because actually you have to rehearse it as well. You cannot just put the presentation and you can say anything. Yeah, no, it's not a good way to present. Just try to have a written script. Give an introduction explaining who's your client, how do you fit in the project life cycle, for example, if they are contractors, supply chain designers, and so on. A case study showing what is people doing is always good. Innovation are always welcome. Try to put conclusion. Be prepared for the questions. I don't know what's the presentation time limit, but try to be concise because the time limit will be a constraint for you if you don't manage to put your presentation this time. Don't try to put a lot of text in your presentation. Don't read only from the presentation slides. If it's not relevant, don't put it. If it's not a report or thesis, don't include a lot of information of BIM and life cycle. Don't waste time explaining something which may affect other slides. Don't put too much effort for something doesn't weight with respect to the marking grid. Thank you.
Well said. Excellent. That's exactly you just summarized everything I wanted to say. So
yeah, just this is from the experience what we gained last year. So I would just want to give flavor of the presentation itself. It's not a dissertation. It's not a thesis. You have to be concise. You have to be just to the point.
Yes, and I like the part when you said don't put too much text. Yes, try not to put too much text and rely more on telling us what's going on, or on let the images tell the story basically. The less text there is, the better. We don't want a slide just full of text and a very small image which we can barely see. So that's a very important.
Yeah, it's not a report. It's just the presentation. You have to talk more than read or something like that.
And please start with the relevant information. If you have more time, then you can add some more information that you think might be useful, but make sure that you tick the boxes first. Thank you, Ahmed.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So do we have any questions from anybody?
Yeah, there's a question about it should explain about their rule. I mean in the verbal presentation.
Just 1 second. You should explain about their role. I mean, in the verbal presentation. Yes, it would be good if at the beginning there was a slide that talked about each role, who was in charge of it. Like that slide you saw, like the hierarchy of, or the division of roles. And when each group starts talking about what they did, it very precisely, very brief, talk about the different things you did, who did you collaborate with in reaching those decisions, and focus on collaboration and the communication that you did with the other team members to reach a decision. As I told you in our meetings we had this morning, there is not one role that can reach a decision by themselves. Every decision has to be reached through communication and collaboration with 2 roles or more. And you have to demonstrate that in your work. Does one person speak or several? That is up to you as a group. I think if every group would talk about every group would talk about what they did would be better.
Can I add something, Shadan? Because
yes.
From my experience, I don't know how much the group is, like 20 people or 30 or something. What
no,
we did.
11 and 12.
Okay, 12. Yeah, they can talk all. But because we had another issue, we were like 20 or something like that. So I guess everyone from the main group, just 6 people talked. This is my advice. If it's up to you, but you have to be.
If there is more than one person, like on the architectural team, let's say there's like 3 people.
Yeah.
Choose one person to talk on behalf of the others. We don't want. It's always. It's not comfortable when suddenly somebody changes and the sound changes and everything. It's just like try to choose somebody who has a strong voice that is clear, and for them to speak on behalf of the group. Karina.
Yes, I was just reading the chat, and I think that Yazid meant if everyone had to say their role, or if someone can just introduce it and say it. I don't know if that's what you meant, Yazid, but that's what I got from your question. So I think it's easier for one person to introduce all the roles rather than everyone speaking what they did, because it would take a lot of time.
Yeah. So at the beginning, so there will be a slide that shows each role and each person who did it. Now, I would think one person who would just go through this slide would be better instead of like everybody jumping in and saying their name. But then as we go through the slides, each group would have a part of the slide and they would have a chance to speak about what they did and who they are.
Hi, Shadan. Sorry, I just meant does only one person speaks on behalf of the whole group during the whole presentation, or each section needs to be explained by the concerned, by the person who did it?
I think it'd be better, I think it'd be better the second one if each group spoke about their own projects or their own piece of the project. If there's more than one person, maybe just
engineer will present the structure, then the architect will talk about the architectural part,
yes,
and so on, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? Okay, that's good. Okay then. So I think if there are no more questions and you guys are good with what you know until now, I think that will be it. I don't know if Trina's gonna come back to get the recording of this session. But yes, you guys are free to leave if there are no more questions, and thank you. Thank you, guys.